Back in my university days, I used to be a hackathon hacker. A hackaholic, as my previous boss would call me. In other words, I was a developer who loved going to hackathons. They're weekend events hosted by different colleges and universities, and you go into these saying, hey, I have an idea. Whether it's an app idea, a website idea, a business idea, and you work with a team consisting of other programmers, designers, and sometimes industry subject matter experts to bring that idea to life in this short period of time, being 24 to 48 hours. I can say after doing about, more than 10 of these, it was exhilarating. Working with these talented individuals where we were all committed to a hackathon at hand. These hackathons brought me to MIT a couple of times, one of which where I had the chance to visit the MIT Museum. One exhibit called the Moral Machine relates to the topic of today's discussion, autonomous vehicles. The goal of this exhibit was to get an idea of how people think an autonomous vehicle should behave in a trolley dilemma-like situation. You go to the exhibit, it's just a computer, and it displays a series of animated snapshots, where an autonomous vehicle has two options. For example, in an autonomous car with two adults inside of it, all of a sudden a brake failure occurs, and only two options are available. Option 1. The car will drive straight into the cement roadblock in front of it, killing both passengers. Or option 2. It'll veer off the road and into the sidewalk, killing an innocent mother along with her child beside her. Weighing the options, you have to select which you think should happen. Then you're brought to the next scenario. Other examples include, should the car kill 3 adults or 3 children? Or kill 5 pedestrians who are crossing the road correctly as guided by the pedestrian crossing signal? Or the 5 people in the car? Should it kill 5 dogs or 5 cats? Many scenarios were presented, and in aggregate, the experiment identified the following key themes across different cultures. Participants valued more lives over less, the young over the elderly, humans over other animals. An interesting study of which I'll leave some resources in the show notes below. Today, we have my friend Matteo Delgado on the pod. He has industry experience assessing the safety of autonomous vehicles, and really, it felt like he could talk for hours sharing his insights. What I love about this episode is how Mateo presents his insights in a clear and simple manner, making complex topics easy for everyday consumers to understand. In the show notes, you can also find plenty of resources Mateo recommends if you'd like to take a deeper dive into the rabbit hole of autonomous vehicles. Quick disclaimer, the content is intended for informational and entertainment purposes only and should not be construed as professional advice. But in the meantime, please do not drive distracted and do not nap while you're driving in the driver's seat. Enjoy.
Now we are in the Tesla.
We're in the Tesla.
Ready for a chai chat. Thanks for having me, Jomar. Thanks for the invite. Glad to talk with you today. A little bit about autonomous vehicles and what safety means for autonomous driving cars and where the technology is at and what the future might look like. So I'm excited to chat with you about that. One of the first things I want to ask you is, what do you think an autonomous vehicle is?
That's a good question.
To be more specific, what is your ideal autonomous vehicle?
Yeah.
What do you consider to be the ultimate version of the autonomous vehicle?
Oh, that's a fun thought. And disclaimer for those people out there, I am not an autonomous vehicle expert by any means. That's why we have Mateo here. I'm one of the many people out there curious about the technology, and who knows, maybe one day this car, I'll actually turn on the full self-driving feature on it. But to your question, I imagine autonomous driving, being able to just sit in my car and not have to worry about what it does, like fully not
Anything at
have to.
all, you can take a nap, watch a movie,
I would
completely forget about the experience, about controlling a vehicle,
exactly.
being a passenger.
Yeah, and as you know, right before this podcast, I took a nap, so that would have been great. For every, I drive a fair amount, so for every ride I take, that would be another nap to my day.
Right, and I think that's the answer that most people would give, right? We've seen it in movies or in various types of media that an autonomous full self-driving, the experience will be that the user, the occupants will have no need to supervise the actions of the vehicle. They can completely ignore what's happening on the road around them, and that the driving systems will take care of everything on their own. Whether an emergency happens or um, an unforeseen event occurs, the driving system will take care of that itself. And while that is the ultimate goal, I feel there's a misunderstanding of where the technology is at right now, and where it originated, right? So I think over the years we've all been familiarized with driver assistant systems, such as collision detections or cruise control or lane departure kind of guidance and alarms in vehicles over the years. So that actually falls into the category of driver assistance systems, and they are essential building blocks to get to that end goal or of full autonomous vehicles. So in simple terms, autonomous driving has been classified into 5 levels. From level 1 to 5, it starts with a completely analog vehicle where the driver has complete responsibility of the actions of the vehicle. So steering, acceleration, braking, and being aware of their surroundings is completely up to the driver. So you can think of a car from the 80s being level 1. Progressively to level 2 and 3 is where we find ourselves with most cars today, where they have these advanced driver assistant features or ADS features, such as parking assistance, backup, front and backup cameras that are able to detect proximity to objects, more or less providing you assistance in your day-to-day driving, where you're controlling the actions, but they're helping you be more aware of your surroundings and potentially, alert you if anything, an emergency situation like something popping out in front of you on the road might happen. So level 2 and 3 is what most people are exposed to nowadays. Level 4 and 5 is where the problem of autonomous driving becomes really complicated, where level 4, the vehicle is fully autonomous, and it's the driver might be prompted to intervene in given situations, but it's not the intent of the system. The system wants to do everything it can to prevent driver takeover. So the example of level 4 active in the world right now is the Waymo cars, as seen in San Francisco and other parts of the U.S. Whereas they can be driving passengers all over town, but if an event occurs, an unforeseen event or something that requires an intervention, it will alert kind of the overall system of driving fleet systems and either prompt the operators of the vehicle or the passengers of the vehicle to hit an emergency stop button. Right. Okay. So they have to be aware and to be ready to intervene at a moment's notice based on what the system tells us. So that's level 4, and that is really advanced from what we think of and what we have experience of right now. And level 5 is really the ultimate goal, which is what you mentioned, being able to completely turn off, pay no attention to the road, and the car will more or less solve whatever problem it runs into for you, right? So the end goal being that what most people experience on a day-to-day basis right now with Tesla full self-driving and other vehicles with, let's say, advanced driver assistance vehicles like emergency braking or cruise control with lane change functionality. That's more on the lines of level 3 or level 2 even, because while the actions may be controlled by the vehicle and its software systems, you as a driver have the responsibility to intervene when prompted to, or even just by paying attention, you have to realize that maybe the system is not performing as it should, or it's getting close to a risky situation, so you have to intervene. And that's where the distinction of fully self-driving or partially self-driving really becomes complicated. So as far as, what is actually fully autonomous self-driving, we're not there yet. But we're definitely on the way, and there are different approaches to the problem. But in terms of safety, this is the biggest challenge of all, right? Because we aim to have autonomous driving, but it will only be viable if it's safer than a human driver. That's the general claim that most companies with a stake in the industry say, right? If it's safer than a human driver, then this can be widely deployed onto a massive scale, like different cities across country, and the implementation of the technology will kind of push forward other systems to catch up, like city infrastructure and things like that.
So I just have a question. When you say for it to be considered, that highest level to be safer than a human driver, how is that, I guess, like quantified? Because I know that, unfortunately, still today, driving's probably the most dangerous thing we do as humans, and there's so many crashes that happen within cities, provinces, states, etc. But how do you think that is to be defined for an autonomous vehicle to be safer than a human driver? Knowing that humans still, we still make errors.
Yeah, so the problem there is exactly what you mentioned, is defining what safety means, or what being safe means. If we think about our regular days when we drive, it depends a lot on our style of driving, how safe we are, or how safe we are to others. Someone may be more reckless or more aggressive in his driving style, but he has never been in an accident. Or on the inverse, maybe someone is very defensive at driving, and his ability or skill set or to maybe react to emergency situations might not be as good as the aggressive driver. So is one person safer than the other? That depends on the outside observer in this case. So what is normally considered, or as the approach to solving the safety challenge for autonomous vehicles, is to really understand what the quality of how driving with autonomous vehicle functions is quantified and improved upon. What I really want to say with that is that we want to verify that a car driving with X number of autonomous capabilities has actually been put through a rigorous test of can it respond appropriately and quick enough to a pedestrian jumping in front of it or driving next to a person walking his bike. So the person is walking and the bike is next to the person. Will the vehicle maneuver around that obstacle slowly, or will it slow down completely and kind of tail behind that person walking his bike? And is that considered safe? I think that's a safe approach, but the 3, 4, 5 cars honking you behind you may not think that's worth to be safe.
Yeah.
It's better to just go around it at a quicker pace, maybe scare the pedestrian a little bit, but there's a myriad of challenges to the question of safety. How do we quantify safety, and how do we have a uniform idea of what safety means? Because there are so many systems at play and stakeholders at play in terms of safety, right? You have, the regulatory bodies, you have the vehicle companies that provide the autonomous vehicles or the autonomous fleets, and then you have the regular road users. To some road users, a car might behave different, might behave more aggressively or pose more risk to them than others. So the quick answer is how do we quantify safety? Is that we use a combination of quantifying incidents that happen, so crash data, reported incidents of autonomous vehicles or partially autonomous vehicles with some advanced driver assistant functions, report cases where they have failed. And then we have other methods that point to deficiencies while the car is in operation. So things, for example, like sensors failing while you're driving.
Yeah.
So we're sitting here in a Tesla, and you have more or less 360 degrees of camera vision around you. But do you trust your car more if the front left camera fails? Or do you trust it the same because it has redundant cameras that may pick up where that one camera died? So those two things are things we can measure, and that helped us improve our idea of how safe a camera or a vehicle is driving or is performing during its operation. So it's a complicated question for sure.
Yeah.
But
I can imagine too, like right now today, it's relatively, it's not raining too hard, but I can imagine for some days where it's super rainy, or, if we were elsewhere in Canada, if there was a ton of snow, let's say even a blizzard level kind of weather going on, I guess it makes me think about, how safe do I think this car is if it's driving in that kind of condition.
Mm-hmm. Yeah, so I think obviously it depends on what type of vehicle and its sensing capabilities. What's available to it to mitigate the environment that it's operating under. So in order to define what an autonomous vehicle is capable of dealing with, you have to constrain its operational environment to what it's called an operational design domain. So in the beginning of let's say development of a self-driving car, you want to clearly define the functionality of the system by saying our car can operate under mild to severe rain conditions because while our cameras may be obstructed or covered during rain, we have radar and LiDAR that are not susceptible to rainy conditions and can detect objects and the surroundings of the vehicle under rain and foggy conditions where cameras will be deficient in that sense. If you are driving in, if your vehicle is set to drive in snowy conditions, you have to include that in your development process, because when you're confronted with a heavy snowstorm or the morning after a heavy snowstorm, and now all of the road markings are covered and noticeable road structures like I don't know, even things like sidewalk edges might be blocked or obstructed by the snow, so the car may think that it's on the correct lane while it's now driving onto the sidewalk. So there has to be a clear definition of what the autonomous vehicle will likely encounter, and all the variables that might change to that. So mild to heavy snowstorm, mild to heavy rain, passengers with, or not passengers, but road users with very reflective clothing versus users completely all black, driving at night versus driving during the day. So the common approach to this is that for robotaxi companies such as Waymo, Cruise, before that as well, they geofenced their operations to ensure that their deployment was as limited to elements outside of their foreseen operational domain.
So a relatively controlled environment is
right. If you have a robotaxi service that is constrained to 3 blocks around your neighborhood, it's significantly easier to approach that problem than if you were to deploy it citywide here in Vancouver, right? When those 3 blocks, you expect the same 3 types of intersections. Let's say you have you can only deal with a couple of traffic stops. Maybe one is an all-way 4-way stop, one is not, and then another one is a pedestrian-controlled kind of right-of-way type of intersection. But if you go citywide, now you have variations. You have, traffic signals with 3 lights, one for advanced green to the left. You have other structures and perhaps even intersections where maintenance is being done, where there is no traffic light and you have no indication and no officer kind of signaling you where to cross. So it's very important to have this clear definition of how where your vehicle is going to operate and what its obstacles will be, or the likely things the things it will likely encounter, what they will be. That's an important part of the definition of what an autonomous vehicle, how it should operate at least, and that helps you in your challenge to approach safety.
Yeah, kind of like what you were saying before. There's so many different variables I can imagine. I don't know.
Totally.
I guess as humans, I guess we take it accounted for. Like for myself, I've been driving for maybe more than 10 years, 12, 13, 15 years, and I see all the different variables that happen. Like you're saying, pedestrians, the weather, other cars, etc. But I guess I don't know. I'm sure to lots of you listening, as everyday drivers, we know what to focus on. We're not consuming every single variable, but we're able to focus on what's important and make the corresponding right decision. So yeah, I can imagine.
Or we do our best, right? it's interesting the approach to improving as a driver, from the time that you start driving. Let's say legally here at 16 years old, you can get your license. Obviously, you do a general road test about rules of the law, laws of the road, and then you may do a skills test in a constrained environment, maybe a parking lot. You do that a couple of times, and then you can take on the road test, which obviously there's an examiner looking over your actions and your decision making, but you have to abide by the rules. Obviously, you're not going to cut a pedestrian that's crossing the intersection midway, or you're not going to pass by a stop sign on your driving test. So these experiences are guiding your understanding about how to drive, and your improvement rate is how often you get out there and how often you're exposed to different situations, right? Your spatial awareness becomes better as you get more exposed to different road scenarios, like tight roads in downtown Vancouver, or you experience highway driving with fast pace, maybe more traffic dense environments. In autonomous vehicles, how you train it really affects how your system will perform in the end, because as we mentioned, the geofencing strategy helps you with that. But then if you're looking to scale up, if you're looking to deploy in a new city, all the training that you've done here in Vancouver in the downtown area will not necessarily reflect what you see in downtown Toronto or downtown New York, or even rural areas, for example. In downtown Vancouver, you're not going to see many deer cut across you, but highway driving you will. So the challenge of an autonomous driving system learning and improving its capabilities is, in my opinion, mostly a reflection of the environment it's trained in and the amount of exposure it has to variables in that environment. So if you take the Waymo example, they spent a lot of time driving autonomously in San Francisco because that started as a university project from Google and Stanford. So they accumulated a lot of miles, and today it's still the company with the most amount of autonomous driven miles accumulated, more than any other, because they've been specifically driving in urban scenarios in San Francisco and now other places in the US, where they have trained, they have verified all those miles accumulated in that specific scenario. So that's why their system is much better than other self-driving system in that particular scenario. Now, if you take a Waymo car and you put it in a place where it has not been trained in, just plug it and place it right there to start operating as a robotaxi, it will fail most likely immediately, because it has never encountered, the road structure of downtown Paris, for example, or how pedestrians behave in South America, or how other cars behave in the Middle East, for example, or the road markings, how they look. It could adapt to a certain extent, but it will most likely be be worse at driving than than the method it was trained for, right? So for that specific environment in San Francisco in the limited area. So that is really, on the one hand, one example of how learning and how improving autonomous driving systems works. The other is with the building block model that Tesla uses, right? Tesla full self-driving is more or less a software program that gets updated over time. So it receives updates and it increasingly gains more functionalities to help you in your day-to-day driving. What's good about this approach is that obviously you have the ability to scale up faster, right? You can send an update to improve, let's say, object detection in rainy conditions. So now your vehicle is slightly better at detecting pedestrians versus, I don't know, inanimate objects in rainy conditions. But since the majority of Tesla's driving with that software enabled is mostly in the North American region, the North American performance will be much better than the European performance. So mostly because there are more Teslas driving here, obviously the system is going to optimize towards what it's being trained with, and that is specifically this there's North American type of environment and the behavior of North American pedestrians, for example. So that is kind of the two sides of the balance, right? How do you train your vehicle to improve its functionalities while also being able to scale up and improve its ability to handle edge case scenarios, right? So you're always playing with performance versus safety, in my opinion. We can. Do you have what's your idea? I want to ask you this because you come from a cybersecurity background, and you've obviously seen the impact that has on other systems. For an autonomous vehicle, what do you think its vulnerabilities are in that sense, in terms of cybersecurity? Because one thing that I can say, that's my opinion about why this isn't a widely adopted thing and why it hasn't become this sort of prevalent technology, is that the infrastructure around it's lacking. So if full self-driving were to be implemented tomorrow, for example, I would say there needs to be a massive overhaul of our urban environment, or of our I guess road environment, to be able to communicate with the vehicle and communicate road information to the vehicle as well, and vehicle to vehicle communication in order to enable that. So I want to hear from you. What do you think are some of the cybersecurity challenges there?
Yeah, that's a good question. I can imagine the whole way we see driving and the infrastructure behind it, would have to. It'd be tough because there's so many different players in it and have to be overhauled, whether it's the car manufacturers or if it's even the city infrastructures as well, in terms of is there any coordination that has to be done there. But specifically to your question on cybersecurity, essentially, we're dealing with a computer here, and specifically a computer that does have internet access. So for having driven this Tesla, having brought it to like the Tesla maintenance shop and such, those who work at Tesla, in order to do certain actions, to do certain repairs. They do have the ability to kind of remote into the computer itself. They don't need like a key card, for example. They can do remote diagnostics. They can unlock the car remotely as well, of which it's great in terms of, yes, it gives them the capability to do whatever maintenance work they need to do. But at the same time, if I'm driving and if the security of that backend infrastructure was compromised, the last thing I want is for the trunk to pop up midway while I'm driving because some sort of threat actor somehow compromised the system. Maybe in that case, it's more so for jokes. But if they really wanted to cause damage across all Teslas worldwide, what's stopping them from sending a command to say, hey, all Teslas are going to stop right now, whether they're on a highway, wherever they're driving?
Yeah.
That's always, I guess, the biggest risk when it comes to any sort of autonomous vehicle. I just hate for a threat actor to get access to it and send commands remotely.
Yeah. Obviously, we're thinking very doom and gloom.
Yeah. Knock on wood. Hopefully that never happens.
But at least for me, being exposed to the industry of autonomous driving, and particularly from the lens of safety, that is a big question to answer as well. Once integration of multiple fully self-driving capable vehicles exists, in order to optimize their operations together while they're on the road and on unknown roads, let's say, that have some level of communication to them, you have to expect some level of perhaps malicious interference that's likely to happen with, the city infrastructure or the road infrastructure, let's say, and then the vehicles communicating to it. So it's an interesting aspect for me that I haven't touched upon too much. Like I said, I'm mostly in the safety of the self-driving functions, but to me that is a big sort of challenge facing the industry. Is, I think that for this technology to be fully implementable, countrywide, nationwide, citywide, the road structure, the city infrastructure has to bridge a pretty big gap, and with that gap, with increasingly complex systems, these cybersecurity threats will kind of arise.
What I can add, and before a few years ago, I acted as a cybersecurity consultant, so I was exposed to different organizations in different fields. And what I can say for certain industries which are deemed critical by the government, such as utilities and power, banking and finance, those types of industries, they have regulators to which they go to those companies and say, hey, you have to have this level of controls in place when it comes to cybersecurity in order to operate, or else we'll potentially shut you down because you're deemed a critical service. For example, if a threat actor, or rather, let's start off with, if a certain utility company had very minimal controls in place that don't meet the regulator standards, then we're at risk of not operating anymore, or having severe regulator fines, whatever it may be, to bring those controls up to par of what they'd expect now. Not to say that those controls will 100% stop hacks from happening, but it sets a sort of baseline to say, hey, we have this minimal level of controls before you can actually, or should you operate. And I can imagine for autonomous vehicles, it should be something similar in terms of, at least for cybersecurity, whether there's a certain regulator that says, hey, whether it's state or federal or provincial in our case, or states level for the states, or federal regulation, there should be a certain baseline to say, hey, this infrastructure has a certain level of cybersecurity controls in place to prevent threat actors from coming in. It's not like any, as we say in the cybersecurity world, not any script kiddie who has access to these relatively publicly available scripts and tools can just hack into a car. It has to be very controlled and pretty tight security-wise.
Yeah, it's good that you mentioned control, because one thing that also goes into how the industry is changing, really with cars across the board, is now kind of adoption of the term software-defined vehicle, which are basically newer models, newer vehicle models that majority of their functionality, even this the simplest thing as the steering wheel's connection to the wheels on the front, is done by software. So let me ask you this. So when you think about your ideal fully autonomous vehicle, what amount of trust would you put in it if I said that there are no mechanical components to it? There are software redundancies to it. So a measure, some functionalities that verify, the amount the amount that's steered to the left, it's actually the angle that the wheels change up front. So you have sensors measuring the amount that the steering wheel shifted or the command, the steering wheel shifted to the right or to the left. And you have a sensor telling you how much the front wheels turn to the left.
Right.
How much trust would you put in that? Given everything is software, right? There isn't sort of a mechanical link that has a predetermined amount of turning ratio compared to how much you turn the wheel versus how much the wheels turn to the left.
Right.
That's interesting,
So, yeah,
right?
it's interesting. I'll speak from recent experience, because I had to recently take this car to the shop. What happened was, I'll start with the symptoms of the car. So at first, the rear view camera kind of went down, and then not too long after, all the other cameras ended up shutting off. So if you've ever seen the screen of a Tesla, or the in-car screen, it kind of shows you what the sensors see. So like what cars are on the left, on the right, if there's a stop sign or a traffic light up ahead. What happened was all of that turned black, and it wasn't necessarily sensing anything anymore. Even the GPS component shut down. So I was like, oh, weird. But what still worked, and I'm not 100% sure if this is the case, but the manual, I believe, component, just being able to turn left with the steering wheel, turn right, that still worked. I was still able to, of course, accelerate and press the brake. That still worked as well. So, I don't know, one of my first cars. Yeah, I think my first car was a Corolla, so I felt like just driving my old Corolla again, and I was kind of glad that those core functionalities were still in place, even though the software kind of, I guess, stopped working at the time, malfunctioned. Yeah. And what ended up happening was, that was exactly the case after I took it into the shop, where they just gave the car a hard reset, and then all the other software components came back again, including the safety sensors as well. So I found that to be interesting in that, I'm glad that the manual components, I believe, again, still worked, but had the steering, had the brakes and accelerator been tied to the software specifically and would no longer be functional, then I guess that puts into question the safety behind it, because then I wouldn't be able to drive it anymore, given this software malfunction.
Kind of dependency, right?
Yeah.
So that's a very good example. A little bit different than what I imagine you say, but it's a good one nonetheless because it really happened to you, and you can extrapolate that to what could happen if obviously, let's say you had a vehicle that didn't have a steering wheel and it was deemed fully autonomous, and then the cameras go up, right?
Right.
Your driving capabilities of this vehicle, the vehicle may still be, intact. Let's say it can still steer, it can still accelerate and brake, but now its vision is gone black for a minute, two, while it's performing that reset. So while it's performing that reset, you're in the state of degraded functionality. In this degraded functionality, what's the safest course of action? Uh, do you directly slam on the brakes because you're blind? Would you do that in real life, right? If you are driving? So that all goes back to saying, when an autonomous vehicle is deployed, who has ultimate control of uh, that final safety action, or the final action to prevent a catastrophic scenario, for example. And that is a very difficult question to try and solve in terms of what technology is available to add redundancy to that, and what is the safest action to perform in that scenario. So with the idea of control in autonomous vehicles, the end goal is to relinquish all driver control to the autonomous system. But in the end, you have to build a solid case for that autonomous system being able to handle most driving situations. And the reality is right now is that that's not the case. And really, there isn't one company or one vehicle at the moment that can fully say that they can reliably mitigate all risk scenarios. Obviously, Tesla makes its claims, Waymo makes its claims, but at the end of the day, the technology isn't matured enough yet, in my opinion, to be able to understand those decision-making strategies when its functionality and its capabilities are degraded, right? With software-defined vehicles that will, they change the mechanical connections that they had previously in an analog vehicle. Let's say your Corolla, a mechanical connection from the steering wheel to the front wheels. Now it's done by software, where the potentiometer, the sensor inside the wheel, checks how much it's turned to the right or left, and then it sends that information immediately to the steering mechanism to give that its exact same angle to what you intended to the front wheels. But if one of those malfunctions by even a little bit, even if your steering angle is by a fraction different than what your wheel angle was, and you're driving, that may give you problems and lead to some sort of safety scenario that will pose a risk to you and other road users potentially in the future. So that's the vulnerability that I think lacks in systems right now, is that idea of control, and how much the autonomous system will be able to handle, and can it control itself out of those dangerous situations to arrive at least at a stopped state that's out of the way of some
like
users.
if you're in a highway, pull off to the side.
Exactly. So I could give you examples, and people can see on the news if you type, autonomous vehicle crash. A lot of events happen because um, maybe the sensing of the autonomous vehicle detected something abnormal or something in front of it, and it requires a full self stop. And that full self stop is pretty aggressive. So because it has to be, right? You know, um, if something in front of it suddenly appears, it will stop as soon as possible to not crash into that thing. But you're also ignoring the people behind you. Right. So there was an incident with a Tesla vehicle that stopped, I think, inside a tunnel abruptly, and then it caused a massive rear end scenario, a pileup of cars. So the issue of controllability of an autonomous vehicle and the assurance that the control actions to resolve a risk scenario is where the problem really becomes complicated for the industry. And obviously there are ways to provide assurance that the system will do what will do the best action it possibly can to mitigate that scenario, but reality is very complicated to what theory is. So, and there are much more. There's much more variability to what you will encounter on the road and the combinations of things. And the truth is, autonomous systems right now just don't have the maturity. They are that 16-year-old that's just learning to get his license and really understand how to drive. I think it will take, um, quite a lot of advancements from the decision-making software and decision-making capabilities. Because right now, I think autonomous vehicles have become pretty good at identifying things on the road. Because they've been trained specifically for that, and they've accumulated a lot of data, and have been able to improve their understanding of a 3D environment, whether that's using the Tesla approach with just cameras or the multimodal approach, like other companies like Waymo and Cruise, which have a combination of LiDAR, so radars and cameras. So, it's slowly improving, I think, that capability. But to me, the decision-making process and the decision functions need to mature, and need to mature in a way that they can understand how the vehicle is doing during operation in real time, right? So while a vehicle is driving, can the control software detect that something has malfunctioned in just a small component, maybe, of the whole autonomous vehicle stack? Let's say its image processing is it's not classifying pedestrians with reflective clothing as pedestrians. It classifies it as cones. So that ultimately affects the decision making around that object that it detected as a cone, but it was really a pedestrian. And maybe it leads to the car approaching too close to that pedestrian, and the pedestrian may be scared, and something happens. God forbid it hits the pedestrian. So that is, to me, a big challenge, and something to think about as new advancements are coming down the pipeline for autonomous vehicles. Obviously, right now, computer computer architecture and the hardware systems are slowly improving and catching up to the advancements in software. And to me, it will most likely lead to a breakthrough in the near future. But if you don't have a clear understanding of the safety challenges that will arise, and don't have a clear focus that you need to improve the training of your autonomous system, I think that will leave a pretty big gap to catch up with companies that are thinking about that.
Right. I do have another question. We kind of touched on it before because we're talking about right now case studies. Yeah, whether it's Tesla's autopilot, of course, Waymo has their autonomous vehicles out there as well. So of course we're going to have different companies as players in this new kind of, I guess, driving landscape.
Mm-hmm.
I'm wondering, like, as individual companies, they want to improve their product, improve their technology, but what kind of collaboration, I guess, do you see is needed across in order to, or do you think that would be something that's needed in order to
Between companies
or the infrastructure itself? What do you think?
Between companies, I'm not too sure about how collaboration between companies would work, because essentially the model or the goal, at least right now, for every person that wants to achieve the fully autonomous vehicle goal, it's either to make it into a fleet, so robo-taxi type scenario, or it's for personal vehicle kind of additional capability to just a regular consumer buying their family car, and it has that built-in autonomous functionality. If you go to the fleet route, companies that are solely focused on building autonomous robo-taxis, or I don't know if you've seen, but there are now companies that like Amazon. Zoox is a company in a division of Amazon, but they're building sort of, I think, trolley-looking sort of autonomous vehicles. They look like the trains that you take in some airports to go from terminal to terminal.
Right. Yeah.
But obviously full self-driving and for the city center. So the robotaxi route, I think it's just a race to whoever builds in the most reliable fleet and the safest fleet. Obviously, one has a major head start on all of them, which is Waymo. Others are catching up as well. So the collaboration, what will be the determining factor there, to me, is the integration of city infrastructure and road infrastructure. If let's say one company has a fleet that has built-in connectivity to the traffic light system, that would be huge.
Right.
That would be sort of the biggest game changer for that company to succeed. Why? Mainly because it will be able to add that source of complexity, and say, okay, we have a predictable way of knowing when we are approaching a red light versus a green light versus a yellow light. So in that sense, industry and what would it be? I guess
like city engineering
entities collaborating. That's most likely to happen for the robo-taxi solution. For the personal not robo-taxi, but full self-driving car, for a regular consumer just having a family car. I think collaboration between companies will have to be done to have multiple, let's say, car makes behaving around a city environment or highway environment, behaving fully autonomously together. Because let's say you have a Tesla, I have a Toyota or whatever car you want, and we have both full driving capability. We will benefit equally if we can communicate to each other about our status, let's say, or the status of our capabilities, our understanding of where we are in the road at a given point in time, and who has the right of way if we both come to the same intersection. That to me is where the company collaboration, by that I mean the company that makes the autonomous driving system, that's where the company to company collaboration will need to happen. But obviously there's also the issue of the road infrastructure as well, right? If your car and my car both know that they are fully driving autonomously, but we have a very hard time of detecting traffic signals or traffic lights under rainy conditions, and in rainy conditions we may detect some reds as greens and some greens as reds. We will both fail even though we're communicating, or there will be a point where your car says it's a red light and my car says it's a green light.
There's a conflict.
Who decides that, right? So,
and especially if you have a car, I guess, behind as well. One car is going right about to cross that traffic light, and then another car interprets it as a green as opposed to a red.
Exactly.
Yeah, there's that conflict.
So, if the solution of autonomous vehicles was only geared towards the personal driving vehicle, I think you need to have that company to company collaboration. So the full self-driving software of car make A has to communicate efficiently and correctly with the full self-driving software of car make B, in order for it all to be a harmonious relationship, to put it in a nicer way. But if you're going the autonomous fleet route of companies trying to develop the ultimate robotaxi fleet, the race is really who can deploy the safest fleet, and the safest fleet will be the one that can integrate with the road infrastructure the best. So whoever wins that race, I think, will benefit the most and not necessarily have to adapt to what other companies are doing. But in real life, everything's much more complicated than we think it is. So I'm not even too sure you can avoid the issue of not having smart city infrastructure that helps fully autonomous driving that is reach its goal of safe driving, or safer than a human driving. So
for sure, that's a lot of complexity. And I guess with my information security hat on as well too, if we are going down the route of like IoT connected city infrastructure, then there's another way for the threat actor to enter to the environment. I'm sure, I think there's some video games out there where the hacker is able to change the traffic lights just to make it convenient to them. But in a case of safety, if someone's just messing around with traffic light flow, bringing down traffic lights altogether, I'd say that definitely adds another level of risk to this whole infrastructure between cars and cities.
For sure. Yeah, if your city is communicating wrong information to the fully self-driving vehicles on the road, can those fully self-driving vehicles know
Right.
that the traffic lights are not supposed to be green, or
Right.
they are not supposed to be red at this time,
Right.
or even the case that, let's say, a bad actor changes. Well, obviously, speed limit signs aren't digital, and they're not changed based on software. But let's say they were. Maybe in some areas they are, but let's say the speed limits change for a particular section of the road. Would that information then be transmitted to the fully self-driving cars as well, in this fully integrated environment of city infrastructure and fully self-driving cars? Or would the cameras of the fully self-driving vehicles be able to see the sign, see the new numbers, and then do this processing inside of milliseconds, right? To say, okay, I'm going to reduce my speed, and then for this section, we're going to slow it. So every time you add that layer of complexity, obviously from what you mentioned, you're going to have many more problems to find a solution to avoid that malicious person changing the information of the road infrastructure that it sends to the vehicle, or if that malicious person infiltrates the over-the-air updates that your Teslas or your Toyotas or your Hondas or whatever receives as a fully self-driving update. How do you deal with that? Obviously, you have to add many layers of redundancy. You have to improve your authorization services, who and how someone is able to access that platform, or who is in charge of accepting over-the-air updates. Maybe you can only accept an over-the-air update to your full self-driving capability if you are standing still and your car has to wait for a period of 24 hours before you can drive it. All hypothetical, but it's just like some intricacies that may arise based on that problem.
They have to be accounted for beforehand, for sure. So I have one last question. Before this recording, I did a bit of research. Rather, just looked online. What do other people think about autonomous vehicles? And of course, there's a mixed bag depending on who you ask. But I see a common thread where people argue that the streets would be safest if all vehicles were autonomous vehicles. And I just saw that as like a common theme that people thought. And, I just want to get your thoughts on that.
I've heard about that before. I think it's a difficult answer because we essentially have that experiment. When we see it every day, is what if everyone followed the rules of the road? If everyone followed the rules of the road, would there be crashes? Yes or no? It's a very difficult thing to answer because some crashes happen because we are distracted at driving, right? Maybe we're just sitting in traffic and we glance at our phone for a second. We're not violating speed limits. We're not doing anything reckless. We're just, let's say, checking a notification or changing the station of my favorite radio to my favorite radio station or my favorite podcast. And that millisecond, I take my eyes off the road, and then I don't brake in time, and then I hit the person in front of me. So the rules of the road doesn't specify that you can't get distracted for a millisecond, right? But it obviously says that you have to be paying attention. But how do you gauge how much or how well you're paying attention? So to circle back to that is that do I think if all vehicles were fully autonomous, would the roads be safer? It's hard to give you an answer, but
For sure.
my opinion, my answer would be no, until there is an infrastructure that's able to handle that at a city level. And by handling, I mean communicating with all vehicles about what's on that specific road intersection or what's on that specific road. Any deviations from, let's say, normal traffic operation, like an intersection with its with the intersection lights disabled, and there's, let's say, normally a police officer enforcing the right of way of who goes where. How, like, a fully capable, fully autonomous vehicle capable of understanding that and knowing that the deviations from normal traffic behavior is happening. That's a big hurdle for that to take place. A big hurdle to overcome for that to take place. So I think my answer, because I'm a skeptic, my answer would be no.
Fair enough.
Because I think you need much more than just fully self-driving vehicles themselves to be able to have an entire city be fully autonomous and then behaving with no accidents.
Right.
Just the vehicles themselves, right? Essentially, it's the same. It's the problem with people driving, because you don't know who is following what rules of the road at any given point. Like, maybe one person is going to disobey a lane marking for a brief period of time, but their intent is to get quicker to work or something. And to them, that's not a very drastic safety violation, and it didn't pose any danger to anyone around them. In a different variation of that scenario, maybe there is something that what that person or that lane change affected someone else behind them, and then that person behind them, and then that person crashed. So it'd be very difficult.
I'm thinking to what you said in terms of if everyone follows the rules of a road. I guess that includes the cyclists,
the pedestrians.
Yeah, there's variables that won't be a part of this ideal integrated system that have a level of unpredictability as well.
And if you don't have this fully integrated system with city infrastructure and vehicle systems, is your autonomous vehicle system capable of handling those edge case scenarios, or those scenarios where you are confronted with something completely new or never before seen, never before trained on? Those edge cases are really what we want to be I guess mitigate against, or what we want to be robust against, right? Maybe we don't solve it as efficiently as we should, but by us just not having a crash under those edge case scenarios, then let's say full self-driving can be viable. But the reality is that there are too many edge case scenarios to even consider, which is why you want to restrict the amount that your fully autonomous vehicle is exposed to in the beginning stages of development, and then you do an iterative approach to improve on that. And maybe after a few million miles of driving in that restrictive environment or operational design domain, you include a few new scenarios for which it can account to safely based on miles and miles of training. But truth is, it just takes a while, and it goes back to the issue of maturity, right? We just don't have, not yet at least, but just don't have the amount of miles and just complete understanding of the safety challenge and the everyday variables that happen.
That's great. But that's great, Mateo. We planned for 30 minutes. We're at an hour and 18 minutes. Really appreciate having you here, where you're an industry expert in this field, and I'm sure for a lot of my listeners, we're just as curious to learn about this technology that's slowly becoming more prevalent in our day-to-day lives, whether you're driving in one of these vehicles or if you're sharing the road with one of them.
Thanks, Jomar. I appreciate the invite. It's nice to talk to you. I am definitely no expert, but I've always been passionate about robotics and the issue of AI and its integration into complex systems. So my exposure to autonomous driving was mostly from the safety perspective, and it's nice to talk to you about that aspect of the technology. It's nice because you have your cybersecurity background, so it complements really well with the discussion, and to really, what I think is hopefully a better understanding of the general topic for people to listen to, and from the safety perspective as well, right? What are the challenges? So it's nice talking to you. Appreciate this. It was fun.
Awesome. Thanks, folks. Until next time. Ciao.